Hello, I'm Farrell. This is Tally. We are bored of it, and welcome to our review of Undaunted Stalingrad, the red hot game of the minute, and probably the most stressful board game that we have ever played.
Yeah.
I cannot stress enough how much emotion this game gives off, and we nearly broke up twice, I think, during the later stages of the campaign.
Yeah, it was tense.
If you're unfamiliar with the Undaunted series, it's a wildly popular series of two-player head-to-head deck-building war games set in different conflicts in World War II. And one thing that makes it so wildly popular is it has a very simple rules overhead, very simple core, easy to grasp, yet there's such a wealth of strategy and a kind of an amount you can tinker with to build on that core system that you really do get some epic head-to-head conflicts. And even if you don't like war games, honestly, it's something worth checking out just because it's so engaging.
100%. And coming to Undaunted Stalingrad, this entry in the series turns Undaunted into a replayable campaign legacy-style game based around the Battle of Stalingrad. The series already has some campaign-style elements, but here we have permanent soldier death, soldier promotion, surprises, unlocks, branching narratives, and branching scenarios. The core of Undaunted's gameplay is a deck building system. You usually start off with a small deck of around 8 or so soldiers of various types with unique actions. Each soldier is part of a squad, and these squads are represented by tokens on the main map showing where they are located. You'll also have leaders and commanders in your starting deck, which will allow you to recruit further soldiers into your deck.
Both players begin their turn simultaneously, drawing 4 cards from their deck, and then they will simultaneously discard one of these cards for its initiative value. Whoever discards a higher number card gets to take their turn first. And in the main portion of the player's turn, they will play all of their cards, and for each card they can do one thing. They could take one action printed on the card, they could return the card to their supply, hunkering it down, or they could spend that card to flip a suppressed combat token, something we'll get to later. But players have to be careful because not every card in their deck is a soldier that can let them do actions. Some will be fog of war cards, which you'll start with at the beginning of the game and gather more from exploring the map. But essentially they have a very low initiative value and they don't have any actions, so they're there to clog up your deck and create a bit of a problem as you try and deck build. So the actions are quite simplistic, but we'll go through some of the common ones that you'll be doing. So you have the scout action, which allows you to move your scouts and scout terrain. And once terrain is scouted, you can then do the move action to move your other units onto scouted terrain. You'll also be able to do the control action, which will allow you to take control of a scouted tile. And this is often required to win scenarios or complete objectives. Then you have the fighty actions, suppress and attack. And both these work the same way, and they're a little more complex, but they're still not hard to get your head around. Essentially, you'll roll as many dice as you're told, and then you'll see if you get a hit. And the way you calculate a hit is you give the unit you're trying to target a defense value. So they have their own defense value printed on them. For example, this is gunners and it has a 4. Then you'll add up the defense of the terrain it's on, in this case a 3, so then 4 plus 3, and then how many tiles away you are. So 1, 2. So then I need to roll a 9 to hit this gunners over here from where I am. And if you get a successful hit on a suppression, you flip over the token, which then means they can't take actions. And if you get a successful hit on attack, the defending player will have to remove a card of that unit, first of all from their hand, if it's in their hand, secondly from their discard pile, if it's on their hand, and then finally from their deck, if it's not on either of the previous 2.
Each scenario will have a novel map layout and a unique goal, although many of them will be about players trying to control X amount of command points on the tiles. Different goals require different strategies, although you can always win by routing your opponent's riflemen, which means there are no more left to draw once they've been successfully attacked. Also, you can always withdraw and forfeit the battle, but the scenario will usually end once either side has achieved their goal. Now, we won't spend too much time on the Undaunted system because there's already a lot of available content out there from the previous games in this series, but let's just highlight the best parts. Firstly, nearly every decision you make in this game is a really tough one, which for us is one of the best elements of game design. For example, having to choose a card to discard for initiative at the beginning of each turn. It's an absolutely monumentous and stressful decision and a really excellent way at deciding turn order. And surprisingly, it doesn't get any easier when it comes to actually playing your remaining cards, as each one has various actions that you can choose, so more than one, but you're only allowed to pick one when you play it. So it's pretty tough.
And then you get to the deck building, the core of the game, and it's very easy to add cards to your deck, very easy to remove them and put them back in your supply. This means you have incredible control over your deck, so you can build it how you want, and this means you can adapt, you can strategize on the fly, and I can't stress how much fun it is to have that much control over the deck because you can play how you want to play. And I think, for my money, not enough deck building games give you enough control. Lastly, in terms of mechanisms, you have the mechanism where when someone scores a hit, the defender will permanently lose a soldier from their deck. This is an inspired design because it means every roll of the dice filled with tension. It means that every hit is a crushing loss, every miss a cause for celebration. You have to be smart, you have to be strategic when you play because of this, because otherwise you're literally going to lose your deck and be unable to compete. It's such great design all around.
Now moving on to Stalingrad, what an experience. Now, this will be a review with some spoilers if that's something that you are worried about, but we'll really try to be as vague as possible so as not to ruin proper the twists and turns. But we're not really sure how much there is to spoil, given that you can see a lot of what might be coming from the token punch boards and the decks in the box. So what makes Stalingrad more of a campaign game than other Undaunted games, which were already campaigns in their own way? Well, in those games, your deck will stay the same, aside from adding new types of soldiers as the scenarios get more complex. Whereas in Stalingrad, you will permanently lose soldiers from the game, whilst others become more experienced and therefore will get upgraded. Both are really nice touches and tend to make the post-game cleanup particularly engaging.
At the end of the scenario, you'll likely have a big pile of dead soldiers. You're going to shuffle that up and then draw a number, which is based on how many you lost total. And those that you draw will be lost permanently from the campaign. If they're part of the kind of core squads, you'll get a reserve unit sent to you, which is worse in some way. But if they're part of the specialist squads, like say snipers, they're just gone from the game. They're permanently lost for your campaign. And that means you now have less snipers than the other player, and you can even lose entire squads this way, so that you have none of them. And this just completely changes how you play Undaunted, because before, it was always a worry losing people, but now you can't just win at any cost, throw your people to the meat grinder, because you still have another 10 games to play, in which all of your soldiers are reserves, or you don't have them at all. It's just such an engaging mechanism, and it just adds so much flavor to the game. And on top of that, you actually also get to upgrade 2 people per scenario. You'll again shuffle who's left, and 2 of them will be upgraded. They'll get new actions, they'll get better actions, which is also really exciting and fun, and kind of leads you into wanting to play the next scenario because you want to try them out. You want to see what's new, what's changed, what's different. But it makes it all the more heart-wrenching when you inevitably get them shot and permanently killed in the very next scenario because you wanted to show them off.
In a similar vein, you also have buildings that can be destroyed throughout the campaign. It makes the landscape and your actions regarding it a particularly strategic decision, given that you have to live with the consequences. If you destroy your opponent's building to rubble and you win that battle and take it over, you'll likely find yourself in an undefendable position in the next scenario. Also, these destroyable terrains create interesting considerations about how to tackle a scenario, as well as giving you a unique campaign experience.
Speaking of campaign elements, one thing that's great about Stalingrad is that it's replayable, because in one campaign there are certain gameplay elements, certain units, certain troops that at minimum one player won't get to experience because of how the story goes, let alone all those scenarios that you both didn't get to play. And of course you can also swap sides, that's even more replayability. But one thing we loved about the game is the fact that each side gets their own scenario booklet, because first of all what this means is that you can kind of read the story at your own pace and sort out your own deck and set up. And the other is that it immerses you further into the campaign, because you're getting in the minds of your troops, you're learning story elements the other side doesn't know, and often, well, maybe not often, but sometimes there's special secret surprises that you can pull on the other player. And they don't know that. So it just, again, it's so immersive, it's so much fun, and it's just way better than having someone read to you for 4 minutes, and then, you've got to pass around and set up your deck separately.
Yeah, this does lead us to one of the rougher elements of Stalingrad, as you just said. Sometimes there are surprises, and the other player doesn't know that it's coming and just has no way to predict it until it's happened, basically. On the one hand, that's of course very exciting, very dramatic, and if you're the one doing it, it's very get a big buzz to be like, surprise, this is coming, and the other person didn't know. But on the other hand, if you're on the receiving end of that, it can feel a bit unfair or like you've been cheated when the entire scenario just shifts into the favour of your opponent. So yeah, definitely something to consider.
And something you particularly got annoyed about.
Yeah, you definitely did me over, I'd say, a couple of times. I did pull a surprise and it didn't work out.
Didn't capitalise on it at all.
Particularly salty about that. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, I guess one of the big issues is that obviously in a campaign game, you do want to have twists and turns to keep it exciting, but it's a competitive campaign game, so one person always might be left a bit unhappy in these types of situations.
Another thing that we had an issue with was that some scenarios felt uneven. We were told by the book to play some scenarios, and we set them up and we played them, and it was just very much weighted in favour of one or the other. And I know it's kind of a thing with Undaunted that you'll look at the setup and you go, oh, well, I don't know how I'm ever going to win this. But you do tend to, with Undaunted, have very even matchups, very hard-fought battles, even when it looks like that. But in this case, it definitely felt like that when we did the battles as well. And I can understand why they've done this, because, if one player is getting thrashed throughout the whole campaign, they need a way to hit back, they need a win, they need to balance it somehow. And also, on some occasions, it was kind of framed in the story that it was a very difficult battle for one faction. But the issue is, when you have that, it detracts from the win of the player who's won, and it kind of makes the loss feel worse, knowing that you almost were never supposed to win in the first place. Because then you ask yourself, why are we even playing if it isn't evenly balanced?
The good news is this only applies to a handful of scenarios, and they are still very interesting to play. In general, the scenario design is excellent and have provided us with some wonderful experiences. Stalingrad is really just the Undaunted system turned up to 11, with so many interesting mechanisms to create more engaging and strategic gameplay than seen before in this series. The best scenarios that we've played in this box, and the most interesting units we've seen in this box.
Example, engineers. They let you put a mine on the board, and when someone moves or tries to move between two tiles, it will trigger the mine. They'll roll, and if they get hit, which is very likely because they only get their base defense value as protection, they will be killed. So the defender will have to lose a card permanently, and it'll also prevent the move. So it's kind of like a double negative for the person trying to move. Mm-hmm. Very small addition to gameplay, very simply explained. Huge ramifications to the way the game is played. It completely changes how you view the battlefield. It alters movement. It alters how you defend objectives. And this kind of thing is peppered throughout Stalingrad. Just small changes to the existing formula, small additions that just kind of revolutionize the scenario design, the way you can tackle problems, and the way that you battle each other, basically. And there's so much of it. So, I mean, in your campaign, you might have tunnels, which changes how movement works. You might have bombers, which is going to change how you play and how you kind of mobilize your units, and on and on and on. And just can't express enough that there wasn't anything that we were introduced to which we felt we didn't like or wasn't completely enthralling. Yeah,
I think for me it really opens up like the strategic playing field, and I really felt like a commander in a way, because you can approach it in such different ways with all these things available to you that it really feels like you're planning out a real battle with like real ramifications.
Final thoughts. Undaunted Stalingrad is a full recommendation from us, and in fact it's been one of the best board game experiences we've had. And pro tip, we found a really banging World War II playlist on Spotify that really elevated our campaign, and we had a lot of fun listening to that. Now, this is a really big box and it's expensive, but we still recommend it just because it's so highly replayable. I mean, we've played 15 games of this in 2 weeks, and we're literally desperate to go again and play again, do it all over again. But we'd also recommend, if you haven't experienced Undaunted before, while you can go straight into Stalingrad, it might be worth just picking up one of the smaller games, your Undaunted Normandies, your Undaunted North Africas, because they are very reasonably priced. They give you a good introduction into the system, and you can see if you like it. But either way, we recommend it all.
Definitely. And if you have played Undaunted before, then we definitely recommend to get Stalingrad, as it's really an elevation of everything that has come before. The legacy elements work terrifically well, providing immersion and adding some really quite stressful stakes. That said, it's not perfect, and it might not be for everyone. There are some elements which might cause some people to be frustrated, as it did for us. Mostly me, not gonna lie.
I got pretty angry once or twice.
Oh my god, yes, I actually blocked it from my memory. But you maybe got more angry than me. I was more consistently angry. There was one time that you got really...
I flipped my lid.
Anyway, despite this, we really recommend to get Stalingrad, as it's still massively worth it despite these very, very minor complaints. And maybe that's just us because we're too competitive.
Yeah, I mean, this is a great way to break up with someone if you just don't want to tell them, to be honest.
Yeah, you can definitely sort of spark an argument with this. If you enjoyed this video, we'd really appreciate it if you could give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel if you're not already, and please feel free to ask us any questions about the game down in the comments, or if you've already played it, let us know if you agree with us or disagree with us and what your thoughts are on the Undaunted series.
Thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching.
See you next time.